I never thought I'd find myself at odds with my homeowners association. After all, they were just there to make sure the neighborhood stayed neat and orderly, right? Sure, I'd heard the usual complaints about them being overbearing, but I thought I'd avoid the drama. That was until they started showing up uninvited at my house. It started innocently enough. I had a few trees on my property, which was fine, except that they were beginning to grow a bit more wild than the HOA liked. Now, I'd never been the type to let my yard turn into a jungle, but these trees were beautiful. I enjoyed the shade they provided in the summer and the little bit of privacy they offered in a too-close-for-comfort neighborhood. Then came the first note. It wasn't even official, just a handwritten letter slipped under my door. Your trees are a violation of HOA guidelines. Please trim them back immediately. Okay, I thought, I'll trim them back. I wasn't happy about it, but I figured it was a small request, so I went ahead and did what was asked. The trees were cut back to the bare minimum, and for a while I had peace. But that peace didn't last long. The first break-in. A few weeks. Later, I woke up to a loud knock on my door early in the morning. Groggily, I answered, only to find 2 HOA members standing there with scowls on their faces. We need to inspect your backyard, one of them said, looking over me like I had committed some terrible crime. Excuse me? I asked, my confusion turning into frustration. You've violated the HOA rules again, the second one chimed in. We need to inspect your property to make sure it's in compliance. I looked around, unsure what they were talking about. My yard was fine. I had trimmed the trees like they asked, and I kept the grass neatly mowed. I don't think that's necessary, I said firmly, trying to shut the door, but they didn't budge. This is a warning, the first HOA member said, holding up a clipboard. You're in violation again. I stood there, staring at them. No one is allowed on my property without permission, I said, now standing my ground. They simply shrugged and walked away. I felt my frustration bubbling up inside me. What was next? What else would they complain about? That afternoon, I started noticing strange things. My front gate, which I always kept locked, was slightly ajar. A few of my garden tools had gone, missing too. It hit me. They were breaking into my property. The second break-in. A few days later, I caught them in the act. I was sitting at my kitchen table when I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. 2 HOA members were on my property again, this time walking around my fenced backyard taking pictures. I rushed outside furious. What the hell are you doing on my property again? I yelled. Oh, just checking on the condition of the fence, one of them said casually as if they had a right to be there. The fence is fine, I snapped. You are trespassing. You can't just walk onto my property whenever you feel like it. They ignored me and continued taking pictures of the trees and the fence, marking things down on their clipboards. That was it. Enough was enough. I was done letting them invade my space. The plan. I spent the next few days thinking, stewing over the constant violation of my privacy. The HOA was clearly overstepping their bounds, and I wasn't going to stand for it any longer. I wasn't going to sit idly by while they thought they could do whatever they wanted. No, I needed to take control. If they wanted to get into my yard so badly, I'd make it something they couldn't ignore. And so, I hatched a plan. I would build a private park, not just any park, but a park so unique that it would make the HOA's head spin. I would put up a sign right at the entrance making it clear that this was my private property, but I wasn't just going to build anything. I was going to make it special. I started by drawing up a blueprint. I added a small pond, walking paths, and benches. I even planned a fenced-in area with a dog park for my neighbors. I'd place a few art installations, like sculptures made from recycled materials. It wasn't just going to be a park. It was going to be a destination. And most importantly, it would be official. I even got a permit from the city for my little park project, ensuring that everything I built was legal. Now I was ready to make my move. The first day of construction, I started the next morning, beginning with the fence. I put up a large wooden gate, reinforced with posts and a lock. The sign I made went up next. In bold letters, it read, Welcome to Thompson Park, a private registered public space. The HOA had no idea what they were in for. By the end of the week, I had landscaped the area, planted trees, and put in flower beds. I wasn't just building a park, I was building a personal paradise. And the best part? It was all legal. It didn't take long for the HOA to react. Within days of finishing the private park project, I started to get visits, not the pleasant, kind, but the ones that made me feel like I was living in a bad legal drama. At first, it was just a couple of HOA representatives showing up to inspect the area, clipboard in hand, looking visibly irritated that I was defying their rules. They were not happy with the private park I had built. In fact, they were absolutely furious. One afternoon, Karen, the HOA president, and a couple of her enforcers came marching up to my front door. I could already tell by the way they were marching across the yard, their eyes narrowed and their lips pursed, that they had no intention of being polite. "Mr. Thompson," Karen said, her voice dripping with false politeness, "you've gone too far. You can't just turn your property into some public park without permission. This isn't a playground." I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, smirking slightly. "Actually, Karen," I said, "I did get permission. I went through all the necessary channels, and my park is registered with the city. It's legal. You can't just come onto my property and order me to tear it down." Her face reddened. "This is ridiculous. You've violated every single HOA guideline in the book. We will take legal action if you don't immediately remove everything." "You're welcome to try," I said coolly. "But you'll find that I've followed every rule, every regulation, and I'm not tearing anything down. This is a private park now, not just an eyesore to you." Her gaze hardened. "We'll take this to court, Mr. Thompson. You'll see. You can't keep this up." With that, she turned and walked away, her team following close behind. I knew then that the battle was far from over. The HOA wasn't going to just let me get away with this. But that didn't scare me. If anything, it made me more determined to push forward. The police step in. As the days passed, I started receiving a steady stream of threatening letters from the HOA's attorney, each one more aggressive than the last. They were demanding that I remove the park, claiming that it violated neighborhood standards, zoning laws, and every other thing they could think of. But I wasn't intimidated. I had already spoken with my lawyer, Angela, who assured me that the HOA didn't have a legal leg to stand on. The more they pushed, the more I dug in my heels. And then came the day when things took a turn. I was out in the park, tending to the flowers, when I saw a police car pull up to the curb. 2 officers got out and walked toward me. My first thought, the HOA was pulling strings. "Excuse me, Mr. Thompson?" one of the officers said, his voice professional but neutral. "We've had some calls about a disturbance here. A few of your neighbors are claiming that you've created a nuisance with your park." I raised an eyebrow, looking at the officers. "A nuisance? Really? I've received no complaints. In fact, I've only received support from most of my neighbors." "Just doing our job," the officer replied, holding up a piece of paper. "The HOA has made a formal complaint, and we need to ensure everything is in order. They're claiming you're violating some local codes." I couldn't help but laugh. The HOA had gone this far, calling the police over a garden? It seemed absurd. "Well," I said, walking toward the officers, "feel free to take a look around. You'll see that everything is perfectly in order. This is my private property, and everything I've done here is legal and registered." The officers exchanged looks, clearly not prepared for this level of resistance. They walked around the park, inspecting the paths, the pond, the small art installations. After about 10 minutes, they returned to me. "Mr. Thompson, everything seems to be in order here," one of the officers said a bit sheepishly. "We've got no reason to stop you. Just keep things peaceful, and we won't be involved." "Of course," I said with a smile. "Thank you." The HOA's last stand. Despite the police involvement, the HOA wasn't ready to back down. They still had their lawyers sending me letters, trying to bully me into removing the park. But it became clearer by the day that they were losing this battle. In fact, the more they escalated, the more people in the neighborhood started standing up. My neighbors who had been too afraid to speak out began to rally behind me, offering support for the park. People started walking through, enjoying the space I had created, something the HOA had been trying to stop from the very beginning. Finally, I got an official letter from the HOA's attorney. They had finally realized they were fighting a losing battle. They withdrew their complaints and, incredibly, agreed to pay my legal fees for the trouble they had caused. The victory. The victory felt sweeter than I could have imagined. Not only did I keep my park, but I also managed to turn the tables on the HOA. The community came together and the HOA found themselves publicly embarrassed by their overreach. People started using the park more frequently, and it became a symbol